When the world slipped into darkness and silence pressed against the edges of villages, the Greeks believed another presence lingered. At the crossroads where paths divided, in doorways where safety gave way to danger, she was there, torches in hand, dogs at her side, moving through the shadows that others feared to enter. Hecate was no ordinary goddess. She was a Titan's daughter who survived the fall of her kin. Yet she walked freely among Olympians. Honored by Zeus, invoked by witches, and feared by mortals, she belonged not to one realm, but to all three: earth, sea, and sky. Hers was the power of transitions, the unseen choices, the mysteries of night and death. Again and again, she appears in the margins of great tales, guiding Demeter in her search for Persephone, granting victory in the war against the giants, standing behind sorceresses like Medea, and receiving secret offerings at every moon's end. She was not the goddess of love or of war, but of something older, stranger, and harder to grasp. Was she a goddess of fear, haunting crossroads with restless spirits? A protector of households, standing guard at doorways with her hounds? Or a cosmic force linked to the moon and the mysteries of fate itself? To the Greeks, she was all of these, and more. This is the story of Hecate, the goddess of magic, crossroads, and witchcraft. Hecate's story begins not with the Olympians, but with the Titans. She was said to be the daughter of Perses, a Titan bound to destruction and raw force, and Asteria, the goddess of the starry night. From that union came a figure who embodied liminality, born of violence and darkness, yet destined to move freely between light and shadow. When Zeus rose to power and cast down the Titans, most of their children were stripped of honor, banished to obscurity, or chained in Tartarus. But Hecate was different. Hesiod tells us in the Theogony that Zeus not only spared her, but granted her authority greater than most Olympians. Yet some believed her origins ran deeper than even the Titans. Ancient whispers traced her back to the lands beyond Greece, Thrace, Caria, or Anatolia, where people already worshipped a torch-bearing goddess tied to night, magic, and the underworld. If true, then Hecate's presence in Greek myth was more than inheritance. It was survival, an older goddess absorbed and reshaped, but never diminished. From the beginning, she was not a goddess of one clear domain, like Apollo with his sun, or Poseidon with his seas. She was instead tied to the spaces in between. To stand at a crossroads, at the edge of night, or at the boundary of life and death, was to stand in her realm. Hecate was the one who moved between worlds, and it was from this liminal birthright that her power drew its strength. The Greeks rarely agreed on how the gods truly looked, but with Hecate, the uncertainty was part of her nature. She was a goddess who belonged to thresholds and shadows, and her image often reflected that mystery. In early art, she appears as a single figure, tall, torch-bearing, often cloaked, sometimes holding a key or a dagger. The torches were her most consistent symbol, lighting the darkness as she guided mortals or descended into the underworld. At her side, artists sometimes added dogs, hounds that howled at night and were said to sense her presence before humans ever could. Over time, her image changed. By the classical and Hellenistic periods, she was no longer shown as one figure, but three. The triple-bodied Hecate, but we'll touch on that later. Other symbols clung to her as well. Snakes coiled at her feet, keys dangled from her hands, and in some depictions she carried a whip, a rope, or a dagger. Everything about her imagery spoke of boundaries, things that bound, unlocked, guided, or cut away. She was not radiant like Apollo or beautiful like Aphrodite. She was instead shadowed, watchful, a figure you sensed at the edges of firelight, never fully in view. For the Greeks, her appearance was not meant to comfort. It was meant to remind them that some forces could not be tamed, only respected. Hecate's place among the gods was unusual. As we already mentioned, her parents were the Titan Perses, tied to raw force and destruction, and Asteria, a goddess of the starry night who cast herself into the sea to escape Zeus, later becoming the island of Delos. From them, Hecate inherited both the violence of her father and the starlit mystery of her mother, a heritage that made her naturally liminal, a goddess who lived in between extremes. Her ties extended far beyond her lineage. Among the Olympians, Hecate was closely connected to Persephone. When Hades abducted the maiden into the underworld, Hecate alone heard her cries. She guided Demeter in her desperate search, and when Persephone was finally allowed to return for part of each year, Hecate became her companion in the underworld. This role cemented her as a goddess who could move freely between worlds of the living and the dead. In time, Hecate's identity intertwined with other goddesses of the night. She was associated with Artemis, the huntress who roamed the wilderness, and with Selene, the personification of the moon. The three became linked as a triad of lunar power: maiden, mother, and crone, with Hecate often taking the darkest and most mysterious form. Though she began as a distinct titaness, her ties to Artemis and Selene reflected her ability to adapt, taking on aspects of different deities without losing her own identity. Hecate's family, then, was less about bloodline and more about connections. She belonged to the Titans by birth, to the Olympians by honor, and to the underworld by companionship. No single world claimed her fully, and that was her greatest strength. She was a goddess of every border and turning point, a figure whose power stretched across all of Greek mythology. Hecate was unlike the gods who ruled with loud declarations or open displays of force. She was quieter, subtler. This gave her an aura of mystery that made mortals approach her with both reverence and unease. At her core, Hecate was a liminal goddess. She presided over the places of transition, crossroads where three paths met, the space between the safety of a home and the danger of the outside, the shifting line between life and death. These were places the Greeks regarded as dangerous, where the familiar order of the world weakened and the unknown pressed close. To leave an offering at a crossroads or to pray at a doorway was to ask Hecate's protection against what might slip through unseen. Her roles were wide and often paradoxical. She was a guardian of households, honored with small shrines at doors to keep away restless spirits. Farmers prayed to her for fertile crops, sailors invoked her on dark waters, and women called on her during childbirth. Yet at the same time, she was the mistress of ghosts and witchcraft, able to summon the dead or unleash phantoms that terrified entire villages. She was feared as a night wanderer, yet trusted as a protector. She was invoked to bless and to curse, to heal and to harm. Her powers reflected this duality. With her torches, she could pierce the darkest night and guide those who were lost, whether mortals in the wilderness or souls in the underworld. With her keys, she could unlock doors between realms, granting or denying access to places no mortal could tread. Her hounds sensed spirits before humans did, and their cries at midnight were believed to signal her passing. She commanded snakes, ghosts, and spirits of the restless dead, not through brute strength, but through authority that few dared challenge. Unlike Olympians, such as Ares or Hera, Hecate did not lash out in bursts of temper. Her presence was steadier, more inevitable. She was the reminder that night always falls, that decisions must always be made at the crossroads, and that every decision held consequences. Mortals didn't simply worship her, they sought her favor in moments where fate itself felt uncertain. In personality, Hecate embodied the balance of fear and protection. She was not evil, though she could be terrifying, not merciful in the way of Demeter or Hestia, though she could be protective. Instead, she stood as a constant force at the edges of human life, holding the power to bless or to curse, depending on how she was approached. To the Greeks, she was never a goddess to be ignored, for to neglect her was to risk the shadows turning against you. When the old order collapsed, the very foundations of the cosmos shook. The Titanomachy was not just a war between generations, it was the breaking and remaking of the world. On one side stood the Titans, the children of Uranus and Gaia, who had ruled since the dawn of time. On the other, the Olympians, the younger gods led by Zeus, who sought to overturn their father's reign. Most